Welcome to the second episode of Ahead of the Cyber Curve, Next Generation IT Security for SMB, a three-part series by Citrix. I'm your host, Lisa Rogers, and today I am joined by Kurt Romer, Chief Security Strategist at Citrix, David Scovetta, Head of Information Security at Wave Mobile Money, and Bert Stangerone, Director of IT Infrastructure, Healthcare Risk Advisors. In this episode, we're exploring proactive IT for small and medium businesses, in particular, how these organizations can maximize their IT investments to enable smarter and more secure digital workspace upgrades that eliminate unnecessary incidents and related costs. Thank you for being with us today. Now let's get started. So let's start with some definitions. What does proactive IT mean, as opposed to more reactive IT strategies? For me, in my background working for a large orthopedic surgeon's office, it's about looking ahead and anticipating possible threats, possible challenges and hurdles, and dealing with those well before they arise. I was often had to go sell the doctors on a concept if they wanted to do something. And I'd say, look, guys, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm planning. And here's what I'd rather do for you rather than what you're asking. And they would generally, the response was, well, thank goodness someone's thinking about that. So to me, that's what proactive IT means. David, what about you?
Thanks, Lisa. So there are two things that really come to mind when I think about proactive IT. We talk about scale quite a bit. One thing that can be difficult to navigate is the velocity of scale. So when you're a small business, projecting for that growth and kind of what you will need in 6 months or 6 years can be kind of difficult if you're growing at a very fast pace, because you will have unique problems and challenges that you may face as a larger organization as opposed to small. And subsequently, the tools and processes you need may be very different between kind of where you are. So it's more than just thinking ahead. It's also about thinking about your projected velocity of growth and thinking about putting ahead the necessary expenditures today for the problems that you're really expecting to have tomorrow, and how you kind of philosophically want to address those as an organization. And those can be kind of tough. And the other thing that I would say is kind of proactive is thinking about new technologies that are emerging. I would say 10 years ago, a lot of the technologies that we use now on a day-to-day basis wouldn't really be considered for a corporate environment, even small businesses, I would say. But we have a variety of new technologies out there. IoT is a great example. There's Alexa for business and things like that. So I think every IT department and steward of good IT practices would be mindful to keep appraised of kind of what's on the horizon, just in terms of emerging trends.
That's a good point, David. Thank you. How about you, Bert?
Thanks, Lisa. To me, reactive IT aligns with the break-fix model, meaning IT departments wait for the problems to arise and then work to remediate a problem. Now, have close to 20 years of experience in IT, and mostly in the SMB market. We see this often leads to loss in productivity and unnecessary IT spend, whereas proactive IT focuses on analyzing systems to discover the trends and then corrects deficiencies and prevents it from reoccurring.
Great point. And Kurt, what would you consider proactive?
Yeah, really, when you look at reactive IT, you want to think beyond IT as being a cost center and a door down in the basement, right? You want to think about IT as really enabling the business, thinking about what the business needs, being able to predict those as much as possible, but having a seat at the table to be part of those discussions and discuss a lot of what if. While also focusing on the experience and balancing security, productivity, and cost. Today's IT is a lot more about infrastructure in many cases. Tomorrow's IT is all about experience.
I like that. So how do you think proactive IT is lacking in the SMB digital workspace? What are some of the difficulty and pain points you're commonly seeing that these companies struggle with? Bert?
Thanks, Lisa. The migration from traditional on-prem to cloud workspaces has led to a gap in proactive security measures. So cloud computing issues have arisen because organizations have moved into the cloud without truly understanding how to properly secure their data. So inadequate safeguards to prevent unauthorized access to digital workspaces can leave the enterprise at risk. Utilizing tools to assess the cloud storage security configurations, identify vulnerabilities during implementation are extremely critical. Another area of concern is data loss prevention. Having a sound backup and retention policy to ensure data protection is a start, but organizations need to consider additional safeguards such as DLP software, which can provide data security by enforcing company policies that determine who can view, change, or share sensitive data, right? DLP tools today, they secure the data by essentially they identify sensitive data, we classify it, we monitor for usage, and then take actions to really stop any misuse by preventing whether it's user access and actions or alerting administrators, et cetera.
Great, thank you. And David?
So I think there's a couple of different areas, but Bert's sentiment generally, I think, hits the nail on the head. Absolutely moving from traditional on-prem to cloud infrastructure, or even moving between cloud infrastructure providers. However the transition happens, or anything similar, there's an underlying cost and overhead that I think isn't always anticipated. So the idea of moving to third-party cloud providers is generally often simple to set up, to implement, and to integrate. But there is much nuance in the security configurations of such systems, monitoring and alerting, periodically reviewing your vendors and third parties for risks that they may have, and if they have a breach, what are your obligations, and how does that kind of work? So I think there are a lot of hidden costs in those kind of IT endeavors that really need to be flushed out very well when choosing a particular path or program for the IT team to build upon. I would also say that in terms of costs, very often, at least from what I see, there's kind of two trade-offs. Once an IT or IT security leader is choosing to make a purchasing decision to help scale their IT, and it's, okay, we're going to go out and buy something, or we're going to go out and build something. And both of those uniquely have their own hidden costs. If you're building your own, that's great. But now you also have to have someone operate it and maintain it and update and patch and all those things. And different but similar concerns for if you're going with another cloud solution or third-party provider that I kind of mentioned earlier. So I guess my main point is definitely spend the time to flush out those potential hidden costs, and as well as cost savings. So if a company chooses to implement maybe a more expensive, more comprehensive product or build something, thinking about the person hours that kind of saves long terms. Those can be quantified, and those can be addressed as kind of a trade-off for the expenditure. So there's a lot of considerations there.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that as IT practitioners, we're often ahead of the curve and seeing what's coming down the pike and seeing what's going to be needed. And the business is not always there yet. So trying to get the funding and the financing to do something that we know needs to be done soon in order to keep the environment secure is sometimes hard to make to a small business that says, hey, it's not broken. Why are we spending money to fix it? So I agree with both of you, but I would add that piece into it also. Kurt, do you have anything to add to that? And also, what are some aspects of the digital workspace that should be proactive, which you think are commonly overlooked?
Yeah, great questions, Lisa. From the gap perspective, I think one of the big ones that we need to address is that people are overburdened. And when you look at the IT resources within an SMB environment, you've typically got a very small number of people who are responsible for a wide set of tasks, and maybe even you're outsourcing some of that. And it's helpful to step back every once in a while and say, what are the things that we're doing that we need to stop doing? What are the essential practices and essential items on our vision and strategy that we're just not getting to or not spending enough time on? And so getting back to what can we do as part of this, go through and sit down with your team and do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and go through and be very honest with each other in each area, and just make sure that you're covering all of the essential aspects. What are the things that are really good for you to be doing on site yet, and do with the resources you have? And where can you, as we've heard from Bert and David, leverage cloud-based resources or take it outside?
Great, thank you. So why should small business and medium businesses prioritize enabling more proactive IT for their digital workspaces? How can doing so help them alleviate the pain points that we discussed earlier? How does it foster a scalable, secure workspace that enables a positive employee experience and reduces circumvention of IT policies? What do you think, David?
So I think there's a couple of different thoughts. First and foremost, I would say the importance of the end user experience is vitally important, not just measuring productivity and how many hours people spend at their desks, but people that are generally happier, have less friction in their day-to-day IT operations will be much happier, much more productive, more likely to stay with the organization, will be more proactive. And those are all very, very important things. So I think those things have a tangible and measurable value. In addition to that, we want to, well, at least I generally want to have employees and staff be a part of the solutioning and feel that they are trusted. And that can often be a difficult line to navigate because we want to have some guardrails in place so that people follow the right policies and procedures when they're asking for new things or new access, new systems, whatever the case may be. And having the right tool sets there and enabling a bit of empowerment to the end user, we are trusting them to participate in making IT ops move a little more smoothly. And I think that's really important too. At the end of the day, I feel that IT is kind of the heartbeat of a lot of organizations. So being approachable when there's a problem, being able to raise issues that may be more of an endemic to the entire organization, but nobody's speaking up. I see that sometimes with email issues where email may be slowed down and it just takes one person to speak up, and it was actually hitting a number of users or departments. So there are a variety of reasons.
Thank you. And Bert, would you like to add to that?
Yes, thank you. David, spot on, and I think I'll just add to some of the operations topics that he discussed. So, we think about a proactive approach helps to resolve small issues before they develop into larger problems, right? But no matter how good they are, standard user support processes are largely reactive even today. Because accessing support services takes too long, many employees don't even report situations. Instead, they just kind of suffer in silence. The cost of the business productivity and also user morale is difficult to quantify, but it's considerable. I think now adding in with digital workspace mobility and outsourcing, SaaS and cloud delivered services, there's even greater chance of breakdown. And this puts pressure on the organization to find, I guess, more efficient, automated ways to deliver support services. I think today the most productive and satisfied employees are those who are uninterrupted, responsive, and reliable. I think old legacy processes such as ITIL service desk incident and root cause, those are reactive responses, and companies need to identify and diagnose developing issues early. In a proactive model, companies can find delayed services and failing devices and predict which users will have issues. And overall, a well-designed proactive and preventive service model will significantly improve overall IT performance and user satisfaction. You can use this in various ways, whether it's 24/7 monitoring technologies, analyzing events in real time and state of devices, user activity, geolocation, analyzing and acting on these, user-centric metrics needs to happen immediately.
Agreed. And Kurt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say one thought that I would have along these lines is it's always helpful for the organization to have a mission that they can rally around. And today, if you get out and talk across the business about ransomware, everybody understands that as both a business and a technical issue. And you can talk about resilience to something like ransomware and use the NIST cybersecurity framework, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Identify, detect, protect, respond, recover, and talk about the areas where each part of the business is going to have responsibilities for that, shared responsibilities, and how you can improve the experience across the board. And by doing that, you're going to have some very deep conversations. You're going to learn a lot, and you'll set up relationships that will help you continuously improve the rest of the operations, and hopefully, have some long-standing relationships that share honest feedback. I think that's one thing that's missing oftentimes is IT is really brought in more on a very tactical response nature, and we need to get out of that request response loop and really get to where we've got an interactive relationship actively working on giving the business a competitive advantage.
So Kurt, given that for businesses that want to go down the road of enabling a more proactive IT as they modernize, how can they and their IT teams get started?
One of the biggest areas is communications and reflection, and basically taking a look at a lot of the practices that you've got in place across people, processes, and technologies, and just understanding which legacy aspects of that you can get rid of, which are just costing you time and money and really not giving you much of a return. It's looking at your IT portfolio as an investment portfolio and actively making adjustments and changes to it. That's absolutely essential these days. And it's being as selfless with that as possible, and understanding that there might be some people who, maybe they were an email administrator, and guess what? That's really not a viable job anymore. That's best moved to the cloud in most organizations. So how can we find some retraining and reskilling to help that very talented email administrator do something that's interesting to them, but also very beneficial to the business?
What skill sets, teams, resources will small, medium businesses need as they embark on this modernization journey?
I think this one is actually to Kurt.
So we'll go to Kurt. So Kurt, for what skill sets, teams, resources will small and medium-sized businesses need as they embark on this modernization journey?
I think a couple of the skill sets are going to be having the ability to go through and rationalize the IT infrastructure and understand what needs to be kept, what needs to be enhanced, what needs to be replaced. But then once you've done that, have a deep look at processes and automate them so that anything that's mundane, that's causing issues, causing latency, causing additional costs because it's just stretching out, you can go through and automate to an ability to enhance the business directly, or even enhance the ability for IT to support the business. So automation is really key, and it's having analytics acting as observability, insights, and automation to continue to enhance and be able to provide insights back to the business.
Terrific. So what are some of the business outcomes of implementing more proactive IT strategies? Can you share any success stories, David?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So one story actually comes to mind, and This was a few years ago. I had been working at Zendesk. I was more personally on the compliance and security side, but I was at the time embedded in the IT team. And what I observed was the IT team was getting a lot of kind of predictable software and hardware requests. And we were also growing at a tremendous pace. So there were a number of conversations, how do we make this scale? How do we make this easier? What I thought was a really unique and creative solution was they actually make IT product hardware vending machines. So what the IT team did for each of our offices, we set up these essentially vending machines. They would have everything you need, hardware. So for example, keyboards, mice, headset, dongles for Macs, etc. You go there, scan with your badge, you get what you need, and you're done. And the value there is the end user kind of immediately gets what they want. They don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops, submitting a ticket, and then someone from IT comes around and then they respond and then close the ticket. And it's kind of an everybody wins. And I thought that was just a very creative way to solve not a major problem, but something that, when you think of it in terms of time, that people spend a lot of time doing those things. And that was a very interesting way to, shall we say, automate it. So that will always stick out in the back of my head.
And what about you, Bert?
So security awareness is an example, I think, of how we can benefit from a proactive strategy. Your employees are your best line of defense when it comes to preventing security incidents that initiate inside the corporate network. And security awareness programs oftentimes are treated as a one and done, check in the box training that occurs once per year. In my past, I've had the opportunity to implement a security awareness program that really worked towards changing user behavior, right? Presented information in different ways through by instituting interactive courses, simulations, games with incentives to help influence user decisions and make it easier for users to make smarter choices. And in doing so and moving away from that traditional model, we reduced phishing scores and overall security posture significantly.
Good example. I don't have necessarily a success story, but one of the things I'm rumbling with right now is kind of a bring your own device security, because that's what the doctors like to do. Is they like to do whichever device they like. And so in terms of traditional IT, that's always caused a lot of problems in terms of security and monitoring and such like. So finding a solution, proactively finding a solution that allows them to do that and still maintains the integrity of the network is something that I think is a prime example of proactive IT in trying to solve a problem that is out there and kind of just not really going anywhere. Everybody turns a blind eye to it, but it really needs to be solved. Kurt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's about going through and really measuring and reporting on the things that matter most. And I think one of the stories that really hits home with me, I was presenting at a conference up in Canada, and a doctor in the audience stood up and, as we were talking through a project, said, "Thank you. You saved me 27 minutes per week with that last change." And while that sounds rather inconsequential, here's what that really means. And he started talking in terms of the clinical implications, the additional people that he can see, the additional time with his family. And it was just, it was heartfelt. It was very eye-opening. And it was just unbelievable that somebody would take the time to measure it at that level. But they did. And guess what? They use that success story to go through and find other things to measure and other processes that could be optimized, and the time savings went way up from there. But that will just always stick with me.
Good data analysis. I like it. I like it. So looking forward, where do you think proactive IT for the small and medium business will be in 5 years? What do you think it will incorporate that it may not today? Kurt?
I think a lot of what's going to be incorporated is more of the hybrid model that we're seeing today in terms of hybrid work. And instead of IT just focusing on the infrastructure, I think they're going to be focusing on the fluidity of hybrid work and the experience, and helping to make sure that as people transition from their homes to offices and factories, and maybe they're remote caregivers and other aspects, that they have the best possible experience and that they've got the information with them at all points in time to be able to make the best decisions and affect the right security outcomes. It's going to be measured. People are going to be coached. Alexa for Business was mentioned earlier, and some of these opportunities to interact with advanced technologies is just going to be even more prevalent in our daily lives. But it's going to also involve active coaching for security, so that instead of just being told no or just being cut off, you're actively being coached through what you could have done differently, or how to approach something that looks like it would have been an untenable security problem. Maybe you're sending out information that has social security numbers, and the system automatically gives you several options on encryption, sending it a different way, whatever, and really helps you to make the best decision for the business. It's going to be extremely important for individuals, but it's going to be also extremely important for the supply chain and for everybody else that we integrate with. That level of interaction, that level of automation, and that level of ultimately affecting security outcomes will be transformational.
Great. How about you, Bert?
When I think about the global, cloud computing market, I think about software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. They're all growing rapidly, and even more so now with COVID. Organizations are forced into a remote, or at best, or at worst, a hybrid approach. And the market for cloud computing is going to, I believe, double to more than 800 billion in the next 5 years alone. I think the focus today is heavily weighted towards the engineering and architecture in the cloud, and rightfully so. Organizations are looking to leverage what we've discussed: scalability, highly available solutions that help them to carry out their strategic business initiatives. However, I'm seeing organizations lack the knowledge to manage access, budget, and compliance across the workloads in the cloud. And what's needed is comprehensive governance framework to help provide organizations with the ability to control costs, minimize security risks, and accelerate deployment. I think there is a lack of talent currently in the market right now that really understands the governance, regardless of which cloud model you go with, and again, private, public cloud. So I think that's definitely one of the areas that will need to be addressed in the foreseeable future.
Agreed. And David, your thoughts?
So if you had asked me 5 years ago, would I think we'd be where we are today? Some things, maybe not. So Lisa, for example, you mentioned BYOD. And over the past couple of years, I've definitely seen that and scenarios like that proliferate throughout any organization I've worked for. And this is coming from someone who had previously operated in a purely BlackBerry shop. And I think we're going to have more of those scenarios in the next couple of years, where it's less about telling the organization this is how we're going to operate, and more about wrapping security controls and best practices around things that especially executive staff and people internally are already doing. And BYOD is a great example of that. But we're going to have more smart devices coming around the corner. Those are definitely things that it may not always be something that you can put the brakes on. So it's more about, okay, these unique smart devices that we're using for this or that, how do we secure it? How do we think about it from a business perspective, if it is ours or if it is the employee's personal device, or does it matter to us? So I think there will be a lot more of that going forward, especially as a lot of these new technologies emerge.
I couldn't agree more, David. A combination of moving everything to the cloud where you don't need to access the company's infrastructure and people and the remote working and people being wherever, I think it's going to become harder and harder to control what device they use to do that. And so it's going to be incumbent upon us to find a way to, like you said, wrap security around whatever it is they are using and make sure that we are protected, and also have the governance around it, and knowing where you, not only from a cost perspective, but from a data perspective, knowing where your data is and who has your data and where does it reside, and how do I monitor these devices, even if they're not company-owned devices. So all of those issues, I think, are going to become really significant in the next few years. So to wrap it up, is there any takeaway, a key takeaway regarding making the SMB digital workspace more proactive that you would want every viewer to walk away from this seminar with? What would it be? Bert?
So we've talked a lot about the advantages today of adopting a proactive digital workspace, right? Improve collaboration, employee engagement, and increase, productivity. For me, I think it's critical that organizations first define strategic objectives, because this will lead to proper planning and thoughtful consideration of reactive and proactive strategies. And I would urge organizations not to rush the modernization adoption, which leads to improper implementation, and things will be missed that will put the organization at risk and you could come back to haunt them down the road. There's a few approaches to this. Again, you can start thinking strategically, or you can just jump right in and start attacking the low-hanging fruit. I think you can probably do both simultaneously, but I do think the strategic vision is important for the reasons I've laid out, and also for adoption by executive committees, and getting that sponsorship is important.
Thank you. And David?
So I would say two things. First and foremost, keep an eye on emerging technologies. They're going to be the source of a lot of problems, to be candid, for IT. And they can also be the source of solutions for a lot of similar or existing problems. So absolutely keep an eye on those. Things that are trending may soon be in your office. That would be my first thing to be mindful of. Second thing is, based on what most IT practitioners see in their organizations, consider measuring what you see on a day-to-day basis as a predictor of what tools and processes and resources you may need, a year or two from now. So in most cases, those are tangible and measurable things. And if it's predictable, there are probably solutions out there you can buy or build, or at least put together better use of what you already have and kind of take step towards preparing yourself.
So you would probably agree that data analytics is also going to be a major factor moving forward, and that companies who are better able to look at their data, both from a business point of view as well as an IT point of view, are going to be in a better position to make those smart strategic decisions moving forward of where we need to apply IT and where we need to secure things, or where we need to beef up what we've got. So I think that's also an important factor in there. And Kurt, final thoughts on this?
Yes, as you look across IT, you've got people that range from very process-oriented and structured all the way through to very creative. Get them together and tell a story that's 3 years out. Here are the results that we achieved. Here's what it took to get there. And have everybody be able to build into that story, the heroes, the villains, what are the things that they needed to do more of, and what were they concentrating on? What were some of the things that they were getting rid of? And what were some of the wild things that, nobody thought were going to be brought to the table that really made a huge difference, and how do we recognize those? It's really about IT kind of breaking the mold out of, going through the day-to-day and starting to have that creativity, have an innovation mindset, and really look at how they can get much more tied closely to the business. Being able to tell that story within IT is really the first start.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your thoughts. And thank you for attending the second episode of Ahead of the Cyber Curve, Next Gen IT Security for SMB. And many thanks to you, Kurt, Bert, and David, for joining us to share your perspectives and insights.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.